Ask 10 different people what the best heart-healthy diet looks like, and I promise you, you will get 10 completely different answers. One person swears by keto. Another one is absolutely convinced that carnivore is the only way to go. Your neighbor is doing paleo. Your coworker won't stop talking about Mediterranean. And your aunt has been vegan for 6 years and will not let you forget it. And you know what? They're all passionate. They all have their reasons. But here's what I've learned after more than a decade of practicing medicine and helping real patients use real food as actual medicine. And this might surprise you. Prescribing a perfect diet is often not the most helpful thing I can do for someone. And I know that sounds counterintuitive coming from a doctor, but stay with me here because this is important. The truth is, most people, not everyone, but most people, cannot stick to an extremely restrictive plan long term. Life happens. Holidays happen. Stress happens. Celebrations happen. And here's the thing, none of those diets matter, not a single one of them, if you cannot stay on them. So the way I see it, following a nutrition plan that's maybe 70% optimized, but one that you can genuinely maintain for the rest of your life, that is so much more powerful than chasing a 100% perfect plan that you abandon after 6 months because you're miserable and you miss bread. So we are not here today to chase the next trendy diet. What we are here to do is identify the highest yield foods, the ones that keep showing up again and again across multiple studies, across meta-analyses, across decades of cardiovascular research, and figure out how to actually incorporate them into your real life, whatever that life looks like. And I'm also going to call out some foods that are being marketed to you as heart healthy, but that you genuinely need to be careful with. And then at the very end, I'm going to share the best type of exercise, and it's probably not what you think. Plus one supplement that has surprisingly solid evidence behind it to actually help you reverse arterial plaques faster. Yes, reverse. Not just slow down, reverse. But before we get into any of that, we need to talk about how plaques actually form in the first place. Because this is where most people get it wrong, and if you understand the mechanism, you'll be able to make much smarter, much more targeted decisions about what you eat and why. Because your individual circumstances matter. Your risk profile matters. What works brilliantly for someone else may not be the right approach for you. So, arterial plaque buildup. It is not simple. It is not just high cholesterol. It is not just sugar or blood pressure or inflammation acting alone. What happens is a perfect storm of events occurring at the same time. It starts with endothelial damage, which is basically injury to that incredibly thin layer of cells lining the inside of your blood vessels. Then LDL particles, the ones carrying something called ApoB, slip through that damaged vessel wall. Then inflammation oxidizes those particles, which triggers your immune system to rush in and try to repair the damage. But instead of fixing it, the immune response actually makes the plaque grow even bigger. And the more oxidative stress in the environment, the more the cycle feeds itself and repeats, over and over. So what do the high-yield foods that you need to eat actually have to accomplish? They need to target all of those mechanisms simultaneously. They need to lower ApoB. They need to reduce inflammation. They need to improve your nitric oxide production, which lowers blood pressure and protects the endothelium. And they need to calm down that overreactive immune response that keeps making everything worse. That's the standard. That's what we're looking for. Okay, let's get into it. The first thing that jumps out when you look at the major studies and meta-analyses on atherosclerosis is a nutrient called lycopene. And lycopene is a carotenoid, a natural pigment that's found primarily in red and pink fruits and vegetables. We're talking tomatoes, guava, watermelon. Watermelon actually has a ton of lycopene, pink grapefruit, papayas. These are your lycopene powerhouses. Now here's why lycopene is so exciting from a cardiovascular standpoint. It is one of the most potent antioxidants we know of, and one of the central drivers of plaque formation is oxidative stress, that damaging process where reactive oxygen species wreak havoc on your cells and your blood vessel walls. Lycopene goes after those harmful molecules directly. It neutralizes them. It reverses the damage they cause. And we have research to back this up. Studies have shown that high carotenoid levels in the blood may actually slow the early stages of atherosclerosis progression. There was an observational study out of Finland that suggested lycopene intake, particularly from processed tomatoes, which actually makes the lycopene more bioavailable than fresh tomatoes, may reduce carotid atherosclerosis. That's the plaque in your neck arteries that increases stroke risk. So the next time someone tells you that cooked tomatoes or tomato sauce isn't as healthy as fresh, actually for lycopene specifically, the opposite is true. Cooking increases bioavailability. So go ahead and enjoy that marinara with zero guilt. Now the next thing that keeps showing up across the research is something called phytosterols. And I know that sounds very technical and intimidating, but just think of phytosterols as the plant version of cholesterol. Natural plant compounds that are structurally so similar to cholesterol that your body can barely tell them apart. You'll find phytosterols in nuts and seeds, especially flaxseed and sesame seeds. You'll also find them in legumes, whole grains, carrots, broccoli, avocados, and many leafy green vegetables. They're hiding everywhere in plant foods, which is part of why plant-rich diets consistently show such strong cardiovascular benefits. So here's how the magic works. When you eat phytosterols, they compete directly with dietary cholesterol for absorption in your intestines. And because they're so structurally similar, they win, meaning less cholesterol gets absorbed into your bloodstream. But wait, and here's the part most people miss. Most of the cholesterol in your blood doesn't actually come from what you eat. It's produced internally by your liver. So how do phytosterols address that? When your liver senses a drop in absorbed cholesterol, it goes into balancing mode. It starts pulling LDL particles out of the bloodstream to compensate and maintain its own internal cholesterol homeostasis. The net result? Fewer LDL particles, fewer ApoB carrying particles circulating through your arteries over time. And why does that matter? Because LDL, and more precisely ApoB, is one of the most well-established drivers of atherosclerosis we have. When you look at meta-analyses and Mendelian randomization studies, ApoB is not the only factor, but it is a key one. And we have multiple meta-analyses showing that increased phytosterol consumption can significantly reduce LDL levels, with an average reduction of around 14 milligrams per deciliter. That is clinically meaningful. That is not a small number. All right, let's talk about flavonoids. And this one I find absolutely fascinating. Flavonoids are natural compounds found in a wide range of foods: berries, apples, oranges, onions, leafy greens, and yes, dark chocolate. I know, stay with me. So remember that process I described earlier where LDL particles get trapped in the inner lining of your blood vessels, get oxidized, become sticky, attract immune cells called macrophages, and trigger inflammation that makes the plaque grow. Flavonoids directly interfere with that process at multiple points. They reduce what's called adhesion molecule expression, which is basically the stickiness of your arterial walls. When those walls are less sticky, fewer immune cells can attach to them. That lowers inflammation. And it helps macrophages do their jobs in a calmer, more measured way, so they're not constantly converting LDL into its most oxidized and dangerous form. Now, within the flavonoid family, there's a particular subgroup called catechins that I want to highlight specifically. Catechins are found in high concentrations in green and black teas. And a meta-analysis that looked at 9 prospective studies found that drinking 3 or more cups of green or black tea per day was associated with a 21% reduced risk of stroke compared to drinking less than 1 cup per day. 21% from tea. That's not a trivial number. That's a major risk reduction from something you can start doing tomorrow morning. So if you're not a tea drinker yet, I would genuinely encourage you to explore becoming one. Your blood vessels will appreciate it. Now let's talk about extra virgin olive oil. And I want to be very clear about this one, because not all olive oils are created equal, and the distinction matters. Extra virgin olive oil keeps showing up across study after study as one of the most consistently heart-protective foods we know of. High intake is associated with significant reductions in major cardiovascular events. We're talking heart attacks and strokes. And the reason comes down to 2 things: polyphenols and monounsaturated fats. These compounds have powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. They help repair and smooth out damaged endothelium, that inner lining of your arteries that gets injured and triggers the whole plaque cascade. On top of that, extra virgin olive oil may improve insulin sensitivity and further reduce systemic inflammation. So you're targeting multiple steps in the atherosclerosis pathway at once with one ingredient. That's what I mean by high yield. You're getting enormous cardiovascular return for a relatively simple dietary addition. Drizzle it on vegetables, use it for cooking at moderate temperatures, use it as a dressing, make it a staple. This is one of those foods where the evidence is so consistent that I really have no reservations recommending it broadly. Fatty fish is another one I need you to understand. And I mean really understand, not just nod along and forget about it. Salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies. These fish are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA. And these fatty acids are absolutely critical for keeping your heart and blood vessels healthy. Clinical studies have shown that people who eat fatty fish 1 to 3 times per week have a lower risk of heart disease and strokes. But there's one study I want to highlight specifically because it's particularly impressive. The multi-ethnic study of atherosclerosis, one of the largest and longest-running studies on heart disease ever conducted, found that higher DHA levels were associated with a 12% lower risk of carotid plaque progression. 12% lower risk of that plaque in your neck arteries growing. That's the plaque that causes strokes. Here's the mechanism. Omega-3 fatty acids calm down the immune response that keeps aggravating existing plaques. They increase nitric oxide production. And nitric oxide is remarkable. It stabilizes plaques, makes them less likely to rupture, and reduces the risk of those catastrophic clotting events that cause heart attacks and strokes. So you're not just slowing plaque growth, you're making existing plaques more stable and less dangerous. If you can eat fatty fish 2 to 3 times a week, please do it. If you can't, whether it's access, taste, or budget, we can talk about omega-3 supplementation, but the whole food form is ideal. Okay, now let's flip the script for a moment and talk about what to avoid, specifically foods that cause inflammation and foods that are being marketed as heart healthy, but are actually undermining your efforts. When it comes to inflammation, processed carbohydrates are some of the biggest offenders. Pastries, sugar-laden cereals, anything with high fructose corn syrup or loads of added sugar. These foods accelerate the exact processes that build plaques. They spike insulin, promote inflammation, and contribute to oxidative stress. Limiting them is not optional if cardiovascular health is your goal. But here's where I want to spend a moment, because this part genuinely frustrates me. The foods being sold to you as healthy that are anything but. Flavored yogurts. I see this all the time. People think they're making a healthy breakfast choice, but so many commercial flavored yogurts are absolutely loaded with added sugar. The solution? Buy plain, full-fat yogurt and add your own fruit or a small amount of whatever sweetener you prefer. You control what goes in. The yogurt itself, with its protein and probiotics, is genuinely good for you. The flavoring they add to make it taste like strawberry cheesecake is not. Breakfast bars and granola bars. Most people already know that most breakfast cereals are essentially candy in a box. But the bars and granola products that market themselves as the healthy alternative, many of them are not much better. Read the ingredient labels. If sugar, in any of its many disguised forms, is in the first few ingredients, put it back on the shelf. And then there's juice. Oh, juice. This one is genuinely sneaky. Apple juice, orange juice, green juice, even the ones labeled no added sugar or 100% natural. Here's the problem. Even natural fruit sugars, when consumed in liquid form without the fiber that comes with whole fruit, are absorbed extremely rapidly and in very concentrated amounts. Your blood sugar spikes, your insulin spikes, and you've consumed the equivalent of multiple pieces of fruit in the time it took you to drink a glass. Whole fresh fruit is wonderful. Whole fresh fruit is genuinely heart healthy. But the same sugars in liquid form, without the fiber, without the chewing, without the slower digestion, behave very differently in your body. Eat the fruit, skip the juice. All right. Now for the bonuses, because I promised you more than just food, and these two things could genuinely change your outcome. Let's start with exercise, but not just any exercise. I want to talk about a specific type that actually has evidence showing it can reverse arterial plaques. A randomized controlled study published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology looked at what happened when people did 6 months of supervised high-intensity interval training, HIIT, and what they found was remarkable. After 6 months, there was a significant reduction in plaque volume, not a slowdown in growth, an actual reduction. A reversal. And here's the part that genuinely blew my mind when I read this study. The plaque volume regression observed after 6 months of HIIT exercise was slightly larger than what they typically observe with statin intervention. Exercise outperformed statins in this study. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, important caveat. Atherosclerosis develops over many years, even decades, So we don't yet know exactly how these short-term results translate to long-term clinical outcomes. But the initial findings are extraordinary, and they reinforce what we've long suspected. Movement is medicine in a very literal, measurable sense. HIIT doesn't have to mean sprinting until you collapse. It means alternating periods of higher effort with periods of recovery. A brisk walk followed by a faster walk. Cycling at moderate pace followed by a burst of higher intensity. Talk to your doctor, find a format that works for your fitness level, and build it into your week consistently. Now the supplement. I want to be very clear that I am not someone who recommends supplements casually. The supplement industry is largely unregulated, and most supplements simply do not have adequate evidence behind them. But there is one that genuinely surprised me, and it has real clinical data to support it. Aged garlic extract. A double-blind, randomized controlled trial showed that aged garlic extract can actually stabilize vulnerable plaques, the kind of plaques that are most likely to rupture and cause heart attacks. And a separate randomized controlled trial found that the group taking aged garlic extract for 1 year had significantly lower progression of coronary artery calcification. That's the calcium buildup in the arteries of the heart, plus improved blood pressure compared to the control group. This is not the same as eating raw garlic every morning, by the way. The aging process changes the compounds in garlic in a way that makes them more bioavailable and more therapeutically active. Aged garlic extract is a specific product you can find at most health food stores or online. It's not a replacement for diet, exercise, or any medication your doctor has prescribed. But as an addition to a comprehensive heart health strategy, the evidence is genuinely encouraging. And finally, one more thing I love recommending to my patients that doesn't get nearly enough attention in mainstream cardiovascular conversations: sauna therapy. Now, I want to be upfront. We don't yet have direct clinical evidence showing that sauna use causes plaque stabilization or regression the way we do with some of the other interventions I've mentioned. But the indirect evidence is compelling and consistent. Studies have shown meaningful links between regular sauna bathing and improvements in endothelial function, which, as you now know, is foundational to preventing plaque formation. Meta-analyses have shown that sauna use can help reduce blood pressure. And perhaps most striking of all, regular sauna use has been associated with significantly lower risk of all-cause mortality, meaning people who use saunas regularly appear to live longer, across the board, not just from heart disease. Most of the research is observational and mechanistic rather than interventional, so I'm not going to overstate it. But the indirect data is strong enough, and the risk profile of moderate sauna use in healthy individuals is low enough that I think it's a genuinely worthwhile addition to your routine if you have access to one. So let's bring it all together. To reverse and slow the progression of arterial plaque, you don't need to find the perfect diet. You need to consistently incorporate high-yield foods that target the actual mechanisms of plaque formation. Lycopene-rich foods like tomatoes and watermelon, phytosterol-rich foods like flaxseed and legumes, flavonoid-rich foods like berries and green tea and dark chocolate, extra virgin olive oil, and fatty fish. You need to reduce processed carbohydrates and be vigilant about foods marketed as healthy that are actually loaded with sugar. You want to add in high-intensity interval training, consistently, progressively, within your capacity. Consider aged garlic extract as a supplement addition. And if you have access to a sauna, use it. None of this is magic. None of this is a secret. But when you understand why these things work, when you understand the biology of endothelial damage and oxidative stress and ApoB and immune activation, the recommendations stop feeling arbitrary and start feeling obvious. This is how you take care of your heart, not with one perfect diet, not with one miracle supplement, but with consistent, targeted, evidence-based choices that you actually stick to for life. I'm Luisa Hart. Take care of your heart because it is quite literally the engine of everything.